the mercy of it.
Cool. So we're on. Great to finally get you on after a couple of technical difficulties there. But we're here with Tim Bransdon, the Running Lab. Super excited to chat today. Running, I guess, has been something that came relatively naturally to me. I was probably better at endurance running than anything else, but I think I always had pretty bad technique and just battled through because I wanted to win, and that was about all I cared about. So I've had my fair share of running injuries, and that makes it exciting to talk to someone like Tim. We've also recently included the beep test in our real movement standards. So there's a big surge in people wanting to be able to run more efficiently. So yeah, no one better to speak to than Mr. Tim Bransdon. Thanks for jumping on with us today.
Pleasure.
Cool. So how did you get excited about running? Tell us a little bit about your background there.
My background, always been active, sporty, but I was a swimmer when younger, played league, played cricket, played all that stuff, then switched over to rugby. And I was a winger playing 10 years of Premier level rugby. So I did a lot of sprint training.
Yep.
And sprint training is, 70+% drills pretty much every session. Drills, mechanics. Whereas long distance running is pretty much most humans, one way or another, can get from A to B.
Yeah.
What I like to say is that they can get from A to B grinding their knees to dust, or they can get to A to B moving efficiently. And that's the word you used before. The thing with running long distance is that the warm up is generally tying up your shoelaces. And, as far as a drill goes, it's like, I'll just take the first couple 100 meters easy, and then I'll push on from there. Yep. So after my rugby days with my podiatry work, I just started digging deeper into everything, every avenue of sort of fitness and strength and conditioning that I personally enjoyed. So everything I do from a professional point of view has just come from my personal endeavors to be a better, fitter, stronger, healthier human. And then that carries over into my work. So I tried to change the way I ran because I knew that efficiency, or the way I ran, wasn't super efficient. Yeah. And so I tried to change it for about 15 months. Then about 15 months into trying to make tweaks that just don't work, I like to equate that to trying to change an aircraft engine mid-flight. If you sit there and you bring that plane,
implement at that stage.
I was trying to work on the traditional, foot contact and sitting there and changing cadence and tweaking posture.
Yeah.
Then I met two great coaches, and one who was trained under pose method and one who hated pose.
Okay.
And it was, it was very interesting that they were both very similar anyway. So it was a bit of name calling, pose, anti-pose, but it was all based on drills.
Yeah.
And within 6 weeks of working with those two coaches, my running, like long distance running, went through the roof. And it was just one of those like light bulb moments. It's like, shit, it's not rocket science. And that's what I always tell people, is that try and think of any sport played at any reasonable level, not even talking elite, just any reasonable level that you don't do drills for.
Yeah.
You don't train movement patterns, mechanics, speed, power, endurance, everything. And it's like running is the one thing that, keeps me employed as a podiatrist. And so that whole light bulb went off, and it went, shit, these people don't need magic shoes. They don't need orthotics. They need to learn how to run.
Yeah.
And then it was like, who's going to teach them?
Yeah. Let's step back. Yeah. Let's step back a little bit before we go into how, what you're teaching people and how you're teaching, and some of those specifics. Like, the first question, I guess, is, coming from rugby and, being a sprinter and whatnot, like, why run long distances? What does it mean to you, and why did you actually decide that you wanted to be able to keep going for a while? If you're already fast, surely that's a downgrade, is it? Or how do you feel about that?
Back in my playing days when I was younger, longer than 100 meters. Why would I ever run that far? Yeah. I'm not going to zigzag my whole way up the entire field. But preseason, we all know what preseason's like, and we all know that, so many people succumb to the shin splint disease, I like to call it. Yeah. And it's because they put the mileage into preseason, they just get broken. Yeah. Then when I finished rugby, I had that battle of shit, what am I going to do with myself? And, running was just one component I could do to try and fill a void that I got from rugby. Yeah. And I don't enjoy running marathons and half marathons. I usually do them as experiments if I do.
Yeah. So have you done a few? You've done a few longer ones?
Yeah, I've done a few longer ones, usually with crazy shoes. Like I ran a half last year with a sandal on one foot and a shoe on the other foot. Just so I could write a blog post saying it's not the shoe, it's what's in the shoe that matters.
Yeah, right.
But
how did it go? Did you
so
get
it was,
off the sandal or?
mate, it was the first 3Ks, the sandal felt amazing. Loved it. And I hadn't tried it out before, so breaking all the rules, like sit there and break a shoe in. I spent a bit of time trying to work out how to put the freaking straps on, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And then after about 3Ks, I started to get a blister under the big toe, and it just started to really sort of rub away there. And I spent 10Ks up to the 13K mark just trying to not change my technique, but the foot was killing me. And then I'm sitting there going, "Oh, you're going to get a stress fracture on, your second metatarsal." And then it's like, "No, you know too much. Shut up and just run."
So how was it after that? That was 13Ks in. You still had a fair way to go, or?
Yeah, mate, jumped in the medic with 10 and taped up the blister, and that just took away the friction. And this was in the humidity of Florida, so who knew that rubbing on a little thin piece of rubber in the humidity of Florida would give a couple of blisters.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But no, other than that, it was when I launched my online running lab, and I happened to be in the States. It was attention seeking. It was sitting there trying to get people to ask questions.
Yeah.
And that's what it is for me, to sit there and create awareness of whether it's running, feet in general.
Yeah.
That was the aim.
So you are a bit of a contrarian. I looked up, a few interviews that you've done, and the questions were very much like, quite aggressive. Like, why are you against podiatry, and why are you telling people that everyone doesn't need orthotics? Like, when this is your profession. How does that stuff go with you, colleagues in the industry? And you obviously went through that system of learning or indoctrination, that you have to go through to have a university degree. Like,
look, there's a lot of people against what I do, but the bottom line is that I don't treat weak, lazy people. I can't treat weak, lazy people. I don't live in a society of the quick fix and the magic pill. I worked with orthotics, and I still do. I still make them when I have to, but I worked with the whole supporting feet and all the rest of that. But I wore them myself. And that's what got me out of it, was that I started to question why for my rugby I could train every other part of my body to be stronger, faster, more agile, more skillful. I still needed orthotics just to be able to survive. Yeah. So that led me down a very slow path of questioning why. And I don't wear orthotics. My feet are stronger than ever. My body's stronger than ever. And so now it's like, why wouldn't I teach that in my clinic?
Yeah.
Now, it's not that everyone has to run barefoot. And that's a big thing I preach as well, is that I don't care about barefoot running. I care about strong, healthy feet.
Yeah.
And if you want to run, you should invest in your feet, because let's face it, without feet, running's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
So, I do cop a little bit of flack, and my social media does tend to be a little bit one-sided. And I never apologize for that, because people don't know there's another side. People don't get offered an alternative. I'll give you 3 examples that people come into my clinic because they've been referred by word of mouth or whatever reason. Yeah. And one of them actually asked the previous podiatrist whether she could strengthen her feet. The podiatrist's answer was, "That's like trying to teach the blind to read." And it's like, that's it. Job done. And she paid $2,000 for her orthotics. She had to have 3 pairs because they had to be different. And another one was someone fairly high up in the profession saying that, like, strengthening feet's crazy type thing as well, that I walk upstairs every day and my calves don't continually get bigger.
Yeah.
So therefore, like, trying to train my feet, they're not going to continually get bigger. And it's like, no, they won't. So the understanding of human physiology, anatomy, and performance in my profession, it's not taught. And it's not it's not against the uni. It's that if you want to go down this path, you have to find it afterwards, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's
the
just
same in medicine, same in strength and conditioning, really. Anyway, like, the good stuff is, the good stuff is always going to be not where the majority is sort of standing. I think, it's a good place to be. In a way, it's just, there is always going to be that element of conflict and flack, and, people feeling like you're attacking them by, proposing a different solution or just doing something which breaks away from the standard education. But it's a better place to live.
Right. And look,
if you're true to yourself and true to what you believe, then, that's more important than sticking to the doctrine.
Absolutely. It's not that everybody else is wrong. It's that there is another way if you choose, but it's not the easy way. Yeah. So if we look at society en masse, I always talk about there's people down at McDonald's injecting insulin whilst they drink Coke.
Yeah.
So, we're not in a very proactive society. It's that the people that I work with, the people I want to work with, and the practitioners and coaches I train, they're the ones that do actually want to sit there and say, right, rather than create dependence on something like shoes or orthotics, why don't we just look at them like the rest of the body?
Yeah.
We don't stick someone in a sling or a knee brace and say, right, I will see you in a year or two and make you a new one.
Yeah. So when you look at someone, can you see atrophied feet? Like, do you see, just by looking at a foot, just by like playing with a foot, do you see, well, this is a foot that hasn't been working hard, or this is a foot that's, been functioning to a high level?
Definitely. So my first assessment, the assessment starts when I walk out in the waiting room and call someone's name, is that I already see them sort of, with their head down in their phone, or their posture's awful, or the way they walk into the room. So it's just observing general posture. And then I'll look at them standing with bare feet, and I'll get them walking. And for me, it's just looking at what's happening during walking. So I don't look at your traditional parameters of how much they roll in, how much they pronate, and therefore they need orthotics. I want to look at how much they can control whatever movement they have available. Then I want to check what movement they have available and work out the plan from there.
Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about how head position or locked hips will change walking, running mechanics? Because I guess that's we're all battling against that to some degree right now, right? It's how well we're doing in counterbalancing it just from sitting.
Definitely.
Age.
So the whole sitting thing, which is, it's a big part of what I do. I say if there wasn't shoes and there wasn't sitting, I probably wouldn't have a job. The dysfunction through the body from both those things, it's huge. The biggest thing I work on with running, the first thing I tell anybody whatsoever, without looking at their running, without trying to intervene much, is to sit there and say, put your head on your shoulders and run quietly. So those two things alone, the first thing I go after is the head, because the head drives posture with running. We can focus on those hips, and we can focus on those glutes and the core and whatever else, and tuck your pelvis back on. It confuses the shit out of people. How do you engage your glutes whilst you're running? And you're taking, 180 odd steps per minute. How do you engage them 180 times? Well, the first thing is, if you put your head on your shoulders, it's actually really, really hard to have poor pelvis position when you're running. Yeah. But where do people's heads go when they get tired?
Yeah.
Drop, especially
so looking down or like forward head. Is that like the two corrections that you make in there when you're saying head on your shoulders? Like,
yeah. So I just walk up to him and push that thing back up through here. People say, what when I'm running trail, I've got to see the ground. I'm like, I can see the ground. It doesn't mean I have to have my neck rotated at 90 degrees. Yeah. So it's, for me, head position is huge. Hips is huge as well. We both know that I don't know if there's many professions that don't sit there and somehow work on hips. And for me, it depends on the person coming in, how much that's my job to do. But over the years, there's just a lot of things that have just fallen more into my world, because I'd send them off to get something else done and it just wouldn't quite happen. So then I'd start doing it myself. Yeah.
I think that's it's important to build a team and have, be able to refer people to other people, but it's also, if you're really trying to solve a problem, eventually you're going to have a holistic approach, right? Like, you're going to have to make people, assist people with their decisions in other areas. Like if someone, for example, has, keeps breaking bones in their feet and their mechanics aren't too bad, but that they're living on Coca-Cola and, Tim Tams down in the kitchen, then like you're going to have to intervene in that area. And it's not necessarily that you have to be a dietetics expert to tell that person, hey, Coca-Cola and Tim Tams aren't great things to make bones out of. Why don't we try some food and see if that has an impact on your recovery? Like,
there's a lot of the people who do fall into that realm, and the people that I trust in that profession, for instance, they might not be local to where I am. Yeah. And whilst I am willing to go wherever to get the right advice and treatment from whoever, for whatever reason, a lot of people, it does become hard. So if I can offer the little bits that make a huge difference, fantastic. I'm happy to. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the footy and shin splints. That's my background's working in rugby league, and we actually went like a pretty low mileage approach with the teams that I worked with, because we didn't feel like that long, slow running had as much of a role to play. And, when you're looking for maximal efficiency, because there's so many things that you want to include in a preseason. We decided to bring that down a little bit. So we didn't deal with it very much at all, to be honest. But yeah, like talk a little bit about your work with rugby guys and how to get them through shin splints, what can happen there.
The problem with the rugby stuff is that they generally have that 2 months off. And look, it happens at the elite as well, but even sub-elite, they have that 2 to 3 months off before preseason, get back into, running on usually pretty hard grounds at the time or road. And they too have never been taught how to run. So, if they're in the gym, and I'm sure you did plenty of work on technique in the gym with them, and that's what happens. But when they're out on the road, if they ran 5Ks, they're going to do about 5,000 to 5,500 repetitions. And I guarantee none of them have ever done 5,000 squats in a session.
Yeah.
So my big approach is that they can improve their efficiency per stride by 10% over that 5,000 steps. That's huge. That's just one run. But there's a lot of people, it'd be easy to improve their efficiency by 30, 40, even 50%. So it's always hard to sit there and work with someone once they've got shin splints, because we've got two things. We've got to manage the pain and the injury, and we've got to try and keep them in their preseason program so they can actually hit the season running. Yeah. And there's no magic formula for that. That's just got to be case by case, and depends on how proactive the athlete is themselves, or the person is themselves, as to how much work they're willing to put in.
So you're going to do soft tissue work, strengthening work. Like, talk to us a bit about some of the things that you like there. What's worked well?
So if we go with shin splints, a lot of people focus on, let's say, the specific muscle that is actually injured, and this happens a lot through the body. Yeah. My approach is to sit there and say, what other muscles, what other systems, movement patterns failed to put the extra stress on that muscle? So rather than say, all right, there's the pain, let's treat that. Let's work on everything around, up and down of the pain, and work out what actually failed, which led to the stress. So if we can do the manual treatment, which is fine, give a bit of an exercise program for home, and sit there and change up the original cause, then, it doesn't have to be that, 6 to 8 week to ruining the whole preseason thing. I'll always look at feet. The thing with feet, though, and strengthening feet is it's a long-term plan. Yeah. And that's why it gets lost a little bit. There's no shortcuts to strong, healthy feet. And if your feet, you got 33 joints in each foot. If those 33 joints work well, then they're going to have a huge positive effect on everything upstream in the body. If those 33 joints don't work well and don't work as a team, then there's a negative effect up the body. So the real no-brainer is, in the long term, is to sit there and say, wow, if I could get those 33 joints, 20 muscles of each foot working better, athletic performance and day-to-day life performance goes through the roof. So my approach is to sit there and say, right, that's going to take the long term. So I'm going to introduce it on day one. Yep. But I have to couple it with the short-term gains.
So there'd be like low intensity, dexterity and joint mobility. Like, I guess, are you seeing like locked feet from, fit shoes that have been in feet that have been in tight shoes and tightly laced and, Yep. So is it like a lot of trying to get some freedom and width back into the foot and
So let's clear the mobility restrictions. Yep. And then probably the most important part for me is not strength. It's balance, coordination, and proprioception. Okay. So we can't get the wires between the feet, the brain, and the muscles working sharp, then we have no business layering strength. It's like following a squat program without being taught how to squat. Your numbers will go up. Yeah. But eventually you're probably going to break. Yeah. So with the feet, the biggest thing that's lacking when people come in is that proprioception. It's that you put gloves on your hand, you don't become more coordinated. Yeah. And less coordinated. You put thick gloves on your hand, you become even less coordinated. You put a toddler who's just started walking in shoes, they'll rip them off, or they'll crawl, or they'll thump around like Frankenstein because they can't feel the ground anymore. Yeah. So when the feet come in like that, the good thing is that the exercises usually don't take too long to retrain that coordination, that proprioception. Yeah. They're a lot quicker to get that back than they are to get the strength. Then the easy part is that once you've got the foundations of mobility in the feet, and so, there might be some manual therapy with that, but definitely some homework. So mobility in the feet and proprioception, then strength can actually just be walking around barefoot all day, every day. Strength can be wearing the minimalist shoes, not to run, but to go to work.
Yep.
So one of my favorite sayings is that it's the 23 hours a day you're not training that cause most of your injuries.
Yeah.
So I prefer to change people's work shoes than I do their running shoes.
Yeah.
They spend hours trying to work out what magic shoe they need to run, whereas they go to work in these pointy, stiff, rigid, high heel shoes. And that's the men.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my big thing is let's change the work shoes. It's not always possible, which sucks. There's OH&S, there's social pressures. But if we were actually using our feet every single step of every day, even in an office job, they get up, they move, they walk around. If you're using your feet, then when you do go on a run, they're going to work better for you.
Yeah.
As opposed to, let's think about putting your arm in a sling for 8 to 10 hours a day and doing push-ups on Saturday.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's a good analogy, good way to look at it. No one would consider doing that, but I guess we're all doing it to an extent with our feet.
Right. Feet are about the only part of the body that we systematically abuse, restrict, and expect them to carry us around every step of the day.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, that when people are in pain, it sucks because it's 10,000 plus steps a day. And having an orthotic underneath their foot that actually gives them help can allow them to get out of pain and actually move, which is brilliant. It's the same as putting a sling on when you break your collarbone.
Yeah.
My question is, what's the plan to get out of the orthotics?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's probably like,
yeah, anyone who's listening is wearing orthotics, then that's, I guess, the next step is what you're talking about, building mobility into the foot, proprioception, and then layering strength on top of that, continuing to work on that, continuing to use minimalist shoes when you're not highly loaded, and then should be able to transition away from, and would that just be like stepwise, like running in new shoes, doing little bits of activity without your orthotics, and then gradually, more and more?
Yeah. Spot on. Do you need orthotics for casual wear? Do you need orthotics to go to work? And initially you might have. That's fine. And that's my point, is I still make orthotics because I do need to get people out of pain. I do need to take pressure off tissue so it can heal. But there's a plan to get the person out of them. And not everyone will take up the action to sit there and work hard and get out of them. But if I don't offer it, then nobody does.
Yeah, and if you do the opposite and tell people, blind people aren't going to learn to read, then, you're actively discouraging people from doing what they intuitively know they should be doing.
That's right. That's my beef with the profession, is that all too rare is it offered as an alternative. And it's okay if you don't know there's an alternative. But if you're negative against it and you don't and you know something's there but you're negative against it, then that's just ignorance. It doesn't mean it has to be your everything. Like, I treat how I would like to be treated.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's a good way to go.
Yeah.
So I've probably been wearing minimalist shoes for about 8 years, I would say. I was just sort of thinking about it. But at the same time, like, I quit running under the guidance of Charles Poliquin, when I was thinking about strength training and thinking strength training is the be all and end all. I went away from running, which a lot of people in, strength coaching kind of community really went that way. Came back to my senses partly through like the influence of CrossFit and seeing how far guys go with that, but also working with rugby league players who are just big and strong and fast, and they can also run. Okay. So what happened with me, because I'd stepped away from it so much, when I went back to running, I got like an insertional pain on my Achilles tendon, and then was worried that I was going to snap my Achilles tendon. And so like battled on and off with that for the last few years, between times of like strengthening it and then feeling like it's good and sort of letting it go and then sort of tweaking it a bit. And it's been an on and off thing. And so I've wondered whether, like, and I've still stuck with the minimalist shoes, but I was actually a mate of mine who does, like, he really believes in a lot of stuff and does some minimalist stuff. He actually said, like, go back into a 4mm shoe and see if you can run with, with less pain. And it's so strange running on foam, basically. Like, I've got some Innovates with a 4mm, and it just feels like running on big cushions, because I've been in Vivo barefoots without the innersoles, for a few years, and volleys, before that. Like, what about this overcoming this insertional bone stuff, like have you seen issues around that? Do you have
Definitely. So obviously in my clinic, it's sitting there saying, right, I'm going to assess all of your mechanics, your foot function, the way you move, the way you stand, everything, because it's probably something little, and it could be a technique thing with running, and it's something little repeated thousands of times under 3 times body weight when you run.
Yeah.
You know, it's a huge amount of force. Again, running is, people consider it low load and people can get away with it, whatever else. It's 3 times body weight. It's a huge amount with huge volume. So if we found whatever that little weakness, imbalance, whatever it might be, just something through there, and we tweak that, that could be the answer, because you're fit, you're healthy, you're strong, you can do anything else. So there's obviously just a little piece of the puzzle missing. And that's how I like to describe things to people, is that it's all just a puzzle. And the person will tell me a whole bunch of information, which will give me a piece of the puzzle. I'll look, I'll watch, I'll feel, I'll test. And it's all about trying to find those pieces. And when we've got someone like you who's just not quite getting over the line there, it just means we're still missing a piece. Now, it's crazy we talk about running in or walking in 4 mils and feeling like we're on like pillows. It's, back in the day, that was nothing, because most of the running shoes out there are 14 mils. And most people are missing ankle dorsiflexion because they've been living in 14 mil heel pitch, like so, the shoe built higher at the heel than the toes since kindergarten. Yeah. That's my big beef. I'll go around and we can debate what's good for you. We can debate what's good for someone else, but we're all broken humans. We've all been adulterated by wearing shoes and being in this world we've created of sitting at school and all the rest of that. Yeah. My argument is, at what point do we take an awesome child's foot and screw it up? So that's my argument, is that, yes, we can debate what's good for Keegan, we can debate what's good for me and everybody else, and trying to find that in between, which is awesome. That's what we should be doing. If 4 mils of heel pitch, helps you to run and you get the benefits from running, but you don't walk around in those 4 mils all day, every day, that's not bad. Yeah. That's fine. Do we need the 4 mils forever? Well, we don't know that, because we don't know forever. Yeah. But my argument with the footwear industry is that, at what point should we take a little child's foot, which is awesome, 33 joints, 20 muscles, works great. They run around from age 1 to 5 without complaint, and then sit there and say, righto, now you're going to school. We're going to put you in a big, stiff, rigid, supportive shoe. And all the parents think that they need to go and get supportive shoes for their kids for school. For the last 4 years, they've been fine, and we're going to lock this thing up. And I always say that I don't think any child's ever sat in David Jones in January, tried on the Clark school shoes and said, thanks, Mummy, I love them. Yeah. They freaking hate them. They hate them. But they get used to wearing them. It becomes the norm. And I don't know if you've seen my post. For those that can actually see, I don't know if you've ever seen my post of this sculpture, I like to call it. This actual shoe here weighs the exact same as this shoe here. When 20 kilograms worth of child wears this to kindergarten or year 1, the actual weight of that, which is just under 2 kilos, and the actual thickness of the sole in my body weight is the exact equivalent. So my big beef is, I always ask why, and I sit there and say, righto, yep, okay, we're talking about your Achilles, we're talking about someone else, we're talking about things we can't control everything, but there's literally, I can't think of any other part of the body that we take that's awesome and just go and screw it up. My job as a parent with 3 girls is to sit there and say, righto, their feet are awesome. My job's not to screw it up. If their brain's awesome, my job's not to screw it up, and we'll see how that goes in 20 years. So let's practically, I've got a 2.5-year-old and another one due in December. So just one due in December. We got a bonus the second time round. So I always ask people, "Are you sure it's just one?" Yeah, we have had a scan, so it's not hiding in there, I don't think. But some people have thought so, because belly grew a little bit faster than the first time. That must have been a nice surprise on the second go. Surprise is one way to put it. Yeah, it's awesome. They're about 2.5 themselves now. Yeah, cool. It's been a whirlwind. Yeah, but we like to say we got 2 and a spare, so it takes the pressure off. Yeah, I can't even imagine the twins. Just having one at the moment is when people get twins first up or whatever. But well done, mate. Congratulations. Thanks.
What are you putting on their feet? That's my question.
As little as possible. And so when they did need shoes, when they were really little, so give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, grab something.
So when they were really little, my sister-in-law actually found these little things here. They're just a piece of leather.
Yeah.
And just the shape of the human foot, just nothing to them. And someone actually just made them look all right. So they're little shoes called baby paws.
Yeah.
So if they did need to wear something when they were out, they wore them. Now they wear Vivo Barefoot. So they're into the smaller sizes of Vivo Barefoot. And that's what my little girl wears to school. But yeah, it's just trying to get them to sit there and appreciate that feet are awesome. They don't always need shoes. They definitely don't need them to play in the backyard. We walked my eldest to school this morning and had to wear shoes because I went to pick her up on Thursday, and the amount of bindies that are around, like my feet are tough, but I was like a little girl sitting there and trying to creep through these bindi patches. I was stuck in this like little island, like trying to find my way out. So it's time and place for shoes.
You got to slide your feet. Do you ever do that slide your feet technique? That can work on bindies. That's
I'll
a bit
try
of
it out.
That's for anyone in Australia. The little spiky. I don't think other countries get them so much as we do, but spiky little devils. It's like cactus in the grass, and they stick in your feet, and you have to pick them out. So yeah, the sliding feet can actually work quite well. They're pretty vicious at the moment around here too. So I've had a few big ones. Maya doesn't like them. That's a discouragement for the 2.5-year-old as well. Doesn't really like bare feet as much because it's spiky. And then,
there's no reason to be in pain, you know. So, and that's the whole thing with shoes. Where feet are built pretty tough. We've got all the barring deformity, barring something that is not everybody. And flat feet's 1 in a billion cases of deformity, 1 in a million cases. It's usually a weakness and a poor posture of the arch, not a deformity. Barring deformity is that we're born with everything we need except protection from sharp things, really hot, really cold.
Yeah.
So on that note, a shoe should be just to protect us from those 3 things, depending on what we're doing.
Yeah.
Now then we get into sporting requirements, which is completely different, but just for wet.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Just talking on the flat feet, because like a lot of people got rejected from the army. You know, if you talk about war times and that, you know, people were like, I couldn't, you know, I was rejected because I had flat feet. Like, what should they have actually done if they were employing you and you were actually wanting to support the war effort? Let's not go into politics. What would you have actually done for their feet, or what's the solution there rather than turning thousands of people away?
Yep, no, perfect question. So in 14 years of doing this, I've only ever had 2 pairs of truly flat feet. And I'm talking pancake flat, just flat as a die. One of them, she was 42 years old, saw her in my practice when I was up in Queensland, never had pain in her life. But for 40 odd years, people have been saying, you need to see someone, they're bad. So she finally did, but her feet were strong. Her bones were just made flat. And so that was just her. I explained that we could give her an arch. It'd just involve a process of slowly bending, tweaking, possibly breaking bones to give her an arch. We both agreed that was probably not necessary, and she went out really, really happy. So the actual shape of our arch is genetic. So whether you have, like these 2 people I've seen, pancake flat, whether you have whatever we call that, you know, medium, neutral, whatever, whether you have high, that's genetic. The shape of the arch, like a really high arch foot, the pressure on the heads of the bones and the ball of the foot will be a little bit different if they're on that angle down to the ground than if they're on a flatter angle. Cool, great. But they're things we can't change. So what I look at is the function of those 33 joints in the foot. So a great little test I would have done in that situation, rather than look at the shape, which, you know, if you're screening thousands of people, you got to come up to some conclusions. And I will say that it's not completely out of the system. I've had 2 people in the last few years come and see me for an assessment. I had to write a report on their feet based on the fact they were trying to get into Navy, and the other one was the reserves just recently. Write a report on that, they'll be all right. So it's not completely out of the system. What I would have them do, as I do every patient, unless they're old and frail, is to have them barefoot, standing with their feet underneath their hips, pointing relatively straight ahead, and just to stand up on their toes and hold. And I'll just be standing in front of them, and I'll just be like standing, chatting away, and they'll be wobbling around like they're drunk. And basically that's, for me, it's not so much as a strength test, because if I ask that person to do 10 calf raises, would have been a no-brainer. It's
Yep.
about balance, coordination, proprioception. Are those 33 joints, 20 muscles plus the 20 muscles in your leg that insert into your foot, are they working together as a team? And then the final one is I'll get them to come down slowly from doing that.
Okay.
So I'll get them to come up. I'm not too concerned about the up. I'll get them to hold. And a lot of people can find a comfortable point there just holding, but then coming down slowly, under control, nicely done. And so for me, that's what I'm looking at. That's one of my little tests, just to sit there and say, righto, besides what I've seen already, how
So
can
that means a lot more than a flat foot. Whether you look at a photo of a foot and someone says, yeah, that's flat, doesn't tell you much. But if someone is doing that test that we've just done and they're wobbling all over the place, they can't control their way down, or they're like too weak to get up, or they get pain getting up, then you go, well, yeah, your foot's got issues and we need to work back from you.
The other part I look at there is the big toe and big toe joint. So the big toe and big toe joint, the reason those things are more than twice the size of the others, they control the foot. So much function comes from there. So when they come up on the toes, if that big toe joint comes up and off the ground, then I'm going to give an instruction for the second one. So no instructions on the first one. Give me an instruction on the second one. Say, right, I now want to try and keep your big toe joint on the ground as you come up and hold. And as you come back down. Because I want to see that thing in a controlled environment can control the foot. Because if you get a runner in who's doing 100 Ks a week and they're up there wobbling around and they keep wondering why they get shin splints, I'm like, can you see that this might be an issue? That when you're running out there, that stuff down the bottom of your body, those feet things at ankles, are just all over the shop. And yes, you've trained your energy systems to be able to actually run 100 Ks a week. But every year you're in a moon boot for a stress fracture and you've got Achilles problems in the knee, and then you're done. So one thing, now that we brought up the big toe thing, this is probably the most important part of everything that I do, is looking at that big toe joint. And I always say, if I can't get that big toe joint to do its job, I have no business working on any other part of the body. What I mean by that is the human foot has two functions. First job, cushioning. So you got 33 joints, 20 muscles just within the feet, and they're like forward drive springs for the body. So whether we're walking, running, jumping, anytime your foot touches the ground, you've got all those joints to mold, adapt, and cushion. So the second job of the human foot, though, is propulsion. Now, whilst we want a soft, flexible, mobile foot for cushioning, we want a powerful, strong foot to push off the ground, even just walking. So we need soft, flexible, strong, propulsive. And that's why I like to call them springs, because they're literally designed as a spring anyway through that arch, is we want to load and spring. And that's why pronation is a good thing. I make people at my workshops sit there and say pronation is good. Pronation is good, like we're a cult. That too much pronation is bad, yes, but pronation is part of that cushioning, part of that shock absorption. And then we want that foot to wind up into a strong, powerful foot to push off, which all happens by that nasty little thing under the foot called your plantar fascia. I only say it's nasty because of how many people suffer, plantar fasciitis, plantar fasciopathy. And it's that as you wind up your toes, but particularly your big toe, this plantar fascia will make your foot one tight, powerful, strong structure to push off the ground. And this is the big issue with shoes, is that for all the things we can argue about heel pitch, cushioning, support, orthotics, all the rest of that, this is a human foot shape where the big toe runs in a dead straight line. Little toe runs in a straight line. Widest part of the human foot's actually the toes. You look at any healthy child, look at your child, widest part of the foot's the toes. You get any child to come up on their toes, the toes will spread to give balance, stability, and support. So the body's inbuilt structures are all there. When you go to push off the ground when you walk, your toes would spread, except, and unfortunately, all your shoes are made as triangles, like this. So when this shoe pulls your big toe across this way towards the little toes, it actually destabilizes your entire foot. So a little test people can do again is to sit there, look down and see if your big toe's on straight or if the thing's crooked, and then sit there and put your arch into a good position. Don't get too technical. Just put your arch into a good position. Pull your big toe across towards your little toes, just like this shoe will do. Pull it across that way and see what happens to your foot. It'll have no power. It'll actually collapse through the midfoot. So try it now. Sit there and pull that toe across towards the outer toes, and then just collapse the middle of your foot. Now pull your toe dead straight, like really straight. Pull it across towards your other foot, make it straight, and try and collapse your arch without moving your ankle or your knee.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
Doesn't move.
Yeah.
Mate, the body's got everything it needs. We've got the best arch support in the world in our big toe. So my big beef is that why do these guys not understand this? They promote the hell out of being good for us. And I'm talking athletic shoes. Yet they systematically pull the greatest natural arch support in the world, okay, your big toe, they pull it out of alignment, which then your entire arch collapses. But it's all right because they've built up the inside of the shoe. Look around the inside. They've built up the inside of the shoe to give you support there.
Yeah.
The whole point is that
it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, it's all marketing, and people are like, oh, but you know, if it wasn't good, they wouldn't do it. It's like they don't give a shit. It's like going into a sports store or a shoe store. It's like going into a food court and trying to get healthy food.
Yeah, it's just what sells, and they're competing against each other to stay in business.
Absolutely.
So these other, barefoot, or minimalist shoe guys have come into the market, and I guess they've made somewhat of an impact. But what do you see happening? Like, is this going to become mainstream thinking? What you're talking about, do you think, or is there too much pressure from podiatry and the shoe industry to push back against it?
It's pressure from society. It's that we can end up being a little bit biased and thinking that people are actually proactive and healthy. And, they tend to be the people we work with and tend to be the people we associate with. Yet overall in society, they want to walk into a shop and find something that solves their problem. When people go and try on a big, thick Hoka, which is about that thick through the sole, it's this big pillow and they've got foot pain. They walk in, try this thing on. It feels amazing. It's great.
Yeah.
I always ask people, what's easier to walk and run on, soft sand or hard sand? And initially they go, no, hard sand. Yeah, that soft sand's really freaking hard to walk across at the beach or to run through. So even though you're on these really cushy, they feel awesome, your joints and your muscles are just like they're on marshmallows.
Yeah.
So I always say if it keeps someone moving, good, fantastic. If they're in pain, an orthotic, a shoe, anything keeps them moving, that's great. But what's the real aim? And my real aim is to sit there and restore full function, movement. And if the minimalist shoe companies really made an inroad, what do you think Nike would do? What do you think the big brands would do? They'd either buy them out or make the same.
They kind of done it with the freeze a little bit, right? Like they've kind of acknowledged it to a point, but then they're still thick pushing.
The freeze were probably even before the big movement. And Nike's done a lot of research. I always wonder what happens behind closed doors in a big footwear, meeting at the big boys sitting there saying.
They know, but there's only so much they can shift and what's going to work for them.
Or I'll be nice for a moment. Are they calculating how many people they can help reduce their pain, which they can, even though it's not restoring function, even though it's not ideal, it's not perfect. If it's helping someone get off the couch, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's just I'm going to preach the other way for those people who want to actually be truly powerful, healthy, and awesome.
Yeah. So, when we talk about function, I know you've done some work with Benny Garrard, who's a good friend of mine, and it was great to see him do so well at CrossFit Games, 15th. A couple of years ago. There's amazing result, and he has always spoken really highly of you. And Al Ramiro as well, who's down in Canberra, who I work with Real Movement Project, has also spoken really highly of your work. For Benny, right? It's partly don't get injured, but it's also getting across the line. So, if we talk about competitive runners and what are competitive runners running in? Are they going to actually get faster if they can learn to run in minimalist shoes?
Not always. I'm going to throw that out there. Not always. Yeah. So I always want people to have the least amount of shoe or the least amount of orthotic, whatever it might be, the least amount of shoe that allows them to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And what an elite athlete needs to do is different to what everyday human, even who wants to be awesome, needs to do. So an elite athlete is a commodity. They need to be at the start line. They need to fall over the finish line and hopefully get a trophy, medal, and riches and all the rest after that. So there is a difference in how I treat both, but the principles are still the same. is that if you move, so let's talk Benny for a little while. I do a lot of work in the CrossFit community and a lot of work with the elite CrossFitters in Australia and New Zealand, is that CrossFit athletes en masse run like shit. They know it, but they can avoid it. They can sit there and get away without doing it. But if they do make it to the games, there's no movement at the CrossFit games that rivals running for repetitions. So I always say, when I teach them, I say, running won't always win you an event, but it can definitely lose you an event. So if you can move more efficiently per interval, whatever it might be, 400 meters, say in CrossFit, or it might be a K, it could be anything. If you can move more efficiently for that 400 meters, and you can come back and pick up the barbell or jump on the rings or jump on that rope quicker than the person who's laboring and their heart rate's through the roof and they've got to wait another 10 seconds, that's what can win you the event. The fact that you actually are smooth whilst you run, and that's what I teach, to be nice and light and smooth while they run, so that when they do get back to the next component of whatever their workout is, they're actually ready to go. And then there's other times when they can, depend on the workout, they can push the run a little bit because they've got other gears that other people don't.
Yep.
So the best runners don't win the CrossFit Games, but the worst runners lose the CrossFit Games.
Yep.
And that's sort of how I approach it from a CrossFit point of view, for sure.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So you're basically saying, that there's not necessarily going to make it people faster if they're, getting out of their spongy shoes and learning how to run in minimalist shoes.
Yes, they can. And I know that if you take the spring away from my feet get sore. So I have trained my feet to be the springs they should be, to tie in everything within the foot, through the arch of the foot, through into the Achilles and the calves. So that whole system there, and then we can keep going up through hammies. That whole system there, I have trained to be a spring. So if you take that away from me by making me run in spongy shoes, I will decrease speed. I will have less elastic return per stride. So we need to capitalize on the fact that we are built to run. We actually do have these amazing elastics from the plantar fascia, from the intrinsic foot muscles in the arch, from the Achilles tendon and the soleus and the gastroc. They're all built into us. So if we can train all that to work as a system, then if we go and put sponginess there, then like being on the soft sand, Usain Bolt's not as fast on soft sand as he is on a tartan track.
Yeah.
So yes, but the only way I flip that around is that if we talk about runners and triathletes doing the mileage they do, and there comes a point where fatigue, fatigue is the enemy. Fatigue is where injuries happen. Fatigue is where everything goes downhill. So is there is there a small amount of cushioning there that just allows, when the fatigue sets in on the muscles, that they still give a little bit of protection to the bones?
Yep.
Again, individual, and that's why a lot of the elite runners, they're not in minimalist, but it's always questionable how much is in their shoes and how much is on the outside just to look like a shoe for their sponsors to make money. I don't know.
Yeah. The original. Have you seen the Steve Prefontaine movie? It's like kind of got the story of Nike woven into it. It's a really good movie.
Yeah.
From, I don't know, a while ago, maybe in the 90s, late 80s, something like that.
Yep.
And the shoes that he was making them in the waffle iron is the story of it.
I've read the bits and pieces about it, but I haven't seen the movie yet. I'll have to.
Yeah. That's an old movie, but basically you could see that those shoes were they weren't changing anything. I knew they do close-ups of the feet and that, they were really, pancake shoes. That's where it kind of started.
That's the thing, is that with all this technology and all these wonderful features of shoes, injury rates aren't going down.
Yeah.
They're not going down at all. So there's something missing there. And it really is that people don't work on their technique. People don't work on their feet. And for running, man, if you run like shit in terms of technique and you got shit feet, well, hey, don't run. Like I always say, the weakest part of nearly every runner I've ever treated is their feet. Now, if you had a weightlifter come and see you with weak legs or a gymnast with weak shoulders, you'd just laugh. You'd say that's crazy. So my big thing is to invest a bit of time in your own feet. Yeah. And not obsessed with your shoe, obsessed with your feet.
Yeah.
And work on technique. And it's really, with the running stuff, it's not crazy complex in respect to training people to run better. And, always sit there and say it's not rocket science. It's just drills. It's just doing the right drills to train the body to move better in the same way you would learn how to catch a ball, pass a ball, tackle without sitting there thinking. You don't have time to think about that stuff in a game.
Yeah. So people should be doing some mobility work to free up the joints in their feet. They should be doing some proprioception balance work to connect the foot to the brain better. Yep. And then they should be doing drills, which will strengthen the feet, but also build the motor patterns to be able to run with nice, smooth technique. This is like...
There's my career in a nutshell, mate.
Their assessment. Yeah. So I've looked a bit into the pose, pose method and that sort of stuff. What it feels like to me when you look at it, is you need to almost be running at a certain speed to do it. Like if you're running slowly, it doesn't make much sense to have that kind of action. Like how does it transition from in terms of the different running speeds, that running action?
Definitely. So all the methods have merit, and I have different aspects of all the methods in how I teach running. So I haven't invented running or a method. I've cut the fat, I've combined everything, and I've thrown out cues that I found didn't work. So the one cue I don't like in pose is lean. As soon as you tell someone to lean, they fold at the hips, they flex at the hips, which is the worst thing to do. So I always tell them to keep their head on their shoulders and stay tall and strong, but relaxed. And it's almost ironic. I want you tall and strong, but I want you relaxed. Now, when you run faster, your body will lean. I don't need to tell someone to lean. Oh, don't lean at the hips, lean from the ankles. They are so confused. They're all over the shop. So for me, it's just about taking the good things of everything and combining it. Now with the speeds, really good point. I tell all of my clients in the running lab, and I tell all the CrossFit athletes as well. I say the best thing I can teach you is to run slowly, efficiently. Because when we need to run fast, well, there is skill involved in that, absolutely. There's power involved in that, but it's for a short distance. When we need to run long, it's generally going to be at a slower speed. When you get to the top of the hill, I need you to be efficient out of that hill. If you're doing a tough mudder and you've just carried a log through the mud, and now you've got a 1K transition to the next obstacle, I want you to be efficient at that slow speed, because number one, you're going to move better, but number two, you're going to be able to bring your heart rate back down. And then you can sit there and either attack the next obstacle in something like a tough mudder or a CrossFit, or you can pick up your pace again. So the magic number of 180 cadence is, there's no myth to that. Is that if I get you to jump up and down on the spot now really, really slowly with your heels touching the ground lightly, you're just going to be plodding. So you're just going to be going boom, boom. And you can absorb the impact of every single little jump. Like not high, I only want you to jump with your ball of feet and toes that far off the ground. But if you do it slowly, you're just going to absorb and then have to jump again. If I get you to do it at about 180 cadence, sitting there just nice and fluent, you're actually using that elastic energy from your arch, from your Achilles and your calves, and it's easier. So when we run, I don't want people to plod where every step is plonk, stop, and then generate the next one. So around 180 steps per minute, not exact for everybody because we're all different shapes and sizes, but I get people to do a bunch of my drills at about 180 cadence in the right drills. And then it just becomes normal to feel like you've got just these little springs underneath you as you move. And the big thing is when I actually am out there running. So when I do the running lab, for instance, in my clinic, we do 3 sessions in the clinic that are all drill based, mobility based, go home, do the work, come back better at the drills so I can layer and build you up. And then the 4th session, we go down the local track and run. And I'll get them running at different cadences, but I won't tell them what the speed is. And I do this when I do workshops at CrossFit gyms as well. I won't tell them what the cadence is, and I'll get them to run at different speeds and just ask them how it felt. And a lot of times, that was awful. I'm like, cool. And then I'll tweak it out, I'll change it up, and then I'll tell them what the actual numbers were after, because 180 sounds scary. 180 steps per minute. And when people just try and run and they've got their Garmin watches and whatever, and they put their cadence on and they try and run at 180 cadence, they're watching it, it all goes to crap. And that was my point about you want to train the way you run when you're not running by doing drills. And when they can run slowly at 180 and I'm almost walking next to them and I'm sitting there saying, tell me you couldn't do this all day if you had to. Tell me you couldn't do this for 10Ks. They're like, it'd be slow, but piece of piss. And I'm like, exactly. So teaching someone to run slowly, efficiently is a huge aim of mine. Because then we can build anything from that. Because when fatigue sets in, boom, we're going to slow down. That's when we want to be. That's when we want to be at our most efficient. Is when we're fatigued, and the guy next to us, his head drops. They start running like shit, start plodding along, and they're actually using more energy per step than you are. That's awesome. You're hurting, but they're hurting more, and they're trashing their body more. So you can then, as you build, you might actually get, feel good again, and you can boost your pace again.
Yeah. So staying light and smooth, even under fatigue, nice and keeping the cadence. It's going to be the secret to running a uninjured.
Yeah. So training, doing drills. Now, I ask all my runners at the end of the program to sit there and do a little circuit of the drills as a warm-up, because all runners suck at warm-up. All of us. Like if I'm going out for a run, doing nothing else in my warm-up, it's hard. But if you can do 20 seconds worth of a bunch of the drills, which includes skipping, come to that in a sec, but 20 seconds of a bunch of the drills, I love some nice, long, slow pause at the bottom lunges just to open those hips up, because we've all sat down during the day. I love backwards lunges, backwards walking lunges. Because after you've gone, 4 or 5 meters forward, I get people to just come straight backwards and they nearly fall over on the first one. And guess what wakes up? Central nervous system all of a sudden, oh shit, I got to be awake here. If we can get, I ask them for 2 to 3 minutes, and if they can do just a little circuit of these drills, they run better. And they're reinforcing that technique thing again before they actually go out. Now, I mentioned skipping briefly, is that's one of the drills that I love. And I've got a drill called bunny hops, which is what I was kind of describing for you to do before. That the heels have to touch the ground ever so lightly every bunny hop. Balls of the feet come off the ground really light. And I get people to do it on floorboards if they've got it. And I say, your whole goal by the time I see you next week is to sound lighter than me. So most people I'll work with will be lighter than me. And I'll stand next to them. I say, I thought you said you were 60 kilos. Like, I'm 84 kilos here and you can't hear me doing these bunny hops. What the hell is that? And if they use their ears and just keep drilling at 10 seconds at a time, nothing more, just 10 seconds repeated here, there, and everywhere, then all of a sudden they're training that spring mechanism of the foot. I don't have to get complex and tell them what I'm looking for the next time. Just be light, be light, be light. And then I'll get them to do it with a rope. So now we've got the brain controlling 2 components. We've got up and down with the feet, and we've got round and round with the wrists. And great warm-up drill, great drill. And then eventually we can switch to doing it single foot as well, to sit there and say, well, you don't run on 2 feet at a time.
Yeah, nice. No, makes a lot of sense. So you just touched on there. I didn't want to mention it, but I wanted to mention it. Like, you're heavier than probably most people that like running, right? Like you're thick enough build. You've played rugby, and you like doing, I guess you like doing some strength work as well. Yeah. Like, is that still part of what you're doing?
Definitely. So I'm one of those that's obese on the BMI and have been since pretty much high school. So I'm 84 kilos, but I'm short. You can't see on the video, but I am. Look, I'm not someone who goes to my front door and runs 3 times a week in terms of I'm going to do 8Ks today, I'm going to do a tempo run tomorrow, whatever else. I love interval training with my running. Yes, I do have to do my aerobic runs here and there, and I make sure I actually get someone to program my running, because as much as I'll program for others like anyone else, it's like I want someone to tell me to do the things I don't want to do instead of the fun stuff. But no,
done.
Yeah, absolutely. I train at the CrossFit gym. I have Luke Starr from Star Strength and Performance programs for me. I'm at CrossFit Wollongong down here, and I love strength and conditioning. I love fitness. I love anything, outdoors. Doesn't matter. My goal is to be a well-rounded human that can lift, carry, basically run around with my kids and then eventually grandkids, as scary as that is to think. But it's not, I don't have the same performance goals of what I did with rugby. And that's what I found when I stopped playing rugby, is I didn't have goals. And CrossFit was awesome, because I found CrossFit after about 6 months and went, wow, I love this. This is everything I loved about preseason. And, I had amazing coaches, which is the world of difference, is that all those faults within my body that I picked up from the training I did through rugby, all those imbalances, I was finding amazing amounts, because the specificity I had towards rugby, I was good at. But then, you sit there and go, wow, like this, could I have been better? But that's in hindsight, it doesn't matter. Doesn't
Well,
matter.
let's answer it just because, you are spending a lot of time with CrossFit. Like, look at these guys now that are going through CrossFit and they're becoming beasts. And Jen Davis is actually a member of the Real Movement Project community. And she's like worked hard in CrossFit. And now she's gone and come 5th at nationals in weightlifting, which is, a big thing in itself. But she's also competing at like national level, or should be, is planning to this year in surf boat rowing.
Yeah,
so,
awesome.
Kicking the other girls' asses in the 500 meter time. She needs to build a base again because she's been weightlifting, but she's done this thing. And I think it is off the back of just going, well, hey, hang on, let's step back and let's just do strength and conditioning for a couple of years and then go and try and do sports and see what happens. And like, even just like that kind of criticism, I guess, that, Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell have of weightlifting, that, hey, this is still strength. Like, why don't you train strength as well as worrying about the technique that you have on the bar? Like, she's just got herself super strong and super fit. And then she's gone out and competing at national level in 2 different sports that, in theory, in strength and conditioning theory, is impossible. Could these guys actually, is it what they actually should be doing? Like, step back from sport for a while and focus on strength and conditioning?
Quite possibly. Tia Claire Toomey is someone that I do a lot of work with, and she's come 2nd at CrossFit Games the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And she went to the Olympics this year in weightlifting.
Yeah.
And she's an amazing human first and foremost, but she's an amazing athlete. Now, I mean, not really here to talk about CrossFit, good and bad and injuries, but I do mention to a lot of people, we're only just going to now see our first generation of CrossFit sort of teenagers and athletes come through, because everybody else had a background elsewhere.
Exactly.
And in the girls, there's a lot of gymnasts. In the guys, there's a lot of college athletes. Whether it's football, track, doesn't matter, is that they've done so much strength and conditioning. Their connective tissue and joints, they're built, they're fine, they're rock and roll, they're amazing.
Yeah.
My theory, and we'll only know this, I guess, I'll put it publicly now, but we'll only know this in 5 to 10 years, is that we're going to have these sort of younger ones come through like any other sport that are just like, wow, holy hell, this amazing. This kid's just going to dominate for 10 years. And they're going to break. And they're going to break not because of CrossFit. They're just going to break because whatever their program, their body, it didn't align. And they were good. They have 2 years off. They come back, they're good. Then they're injured again, just like, they're injury-prone athletes. Then we're going to have others that move really, really well. They've probably got some genetics on their side in terms of just their ability to move or strength or whatever it might be, but their program suited their genetics and their body so well that for 10 years they dominate the sport. And I mean, that's the big thing with CrossFit now, is that the sport is something that people see and do, but within each actual CrossFit gym, it's individual. There's places that, yes, they chase the sport side of things and competitive, but it's a very, very small percentage of people that will ever make it to that level. Yeah. And the premise should be, strength, conditioning, fitness, lifestyle, everything that we preach about every day. Whether you're CrossFit, weightlifting, surfboat rowing, it's all about trying to find, well, what's your aim? What's your end? What's the end look like for you, the goal? All right, what are the best steps to take to get there? And it might not be that you need to get there this year. It might be looking at, like you're saying, take a step back and say, this year doesn't matter so much. But next year, I'm going to be ready and my body's going to be better for it. Away you go.
Yeah. I think it is going to be very interesting to see. I do feel like that history with the rugby guys, like there were a lot of guys who, just were pretty poor as far as strength and conditioning, but they're still NRL players and they were still valued. But like, if you could actually just upgrade them, Ricky Garrard's an interesting one, because obviously he's, Ben's brother, and he's coming on really well in the CrossFit scene. He didn't quite make it in footy. He was in the under-20s, and he probably needed to do what he's done over the last 12 months, like what's happened to his body. If he'd have been able to do that, 2 years ago, then I dare say he wouldn't have made that transition, and he'd be close to playing at that top level. I didn't see him play much technically, like skills-wise, but
neither did I. But the changes in his body are enormous, and working his absolute ass off. What I see from the outside, and it's you sit there and say, oh, could I have, if I'd done this before rugby or whatever else, would it have been different? So I say hindsight's a great thing. But no, he's someone that this year barring injury, as long as he keeps going, it's just on and on and on and up and up and up he goes.
Yeah. He's a good kid. He's driven, and often it's the younger brother or the second one that does better. If you look at Matthew Johns and Andrew Johns, or it's a strong trend in success in general that the second brother or the younger ones will be faster or better athletes just because they were always chasing. And Benny set a really high standard for Rick there. So
definitely, he's probably also sharing all his everything he's learned.
Yeah, all that knowledge.
He could have done better. And, Ricky missed out just by nothing last year to make it. And he was obviously disappointed at the time, but he came into regionals not expecting to make it, but I'm sure in the back of his mind, he only had one goal. Yeah. He wasn't there for experience. He was there to do as well as he damn well could, and he pushed hard.
Yeah, and he's so much better now. So, it'd be interesting to see what will happen. But, it'd also be interesting, because he has come from that complex background of sports, as has Khan and, Benny and all these guys, Hayden Wolfsbauer, all the guys that I know that do it. They played good level of other sports that were more chaotic and stressed the connective tissues and the bones and, the brain and everything in a complex manner. And it'll be interesting whether these kids that just come through and just try and do CrossFit, where it is, pretty linear and, as much as the doctrine of CrossFit is about being ready for anything, realistically, if you're getting ready for the Open and the regionals, there's not that many movements that you need to be doing, and they're pretty much all linear. The World Games are a bit more chaotic. They have more strongman stuff in them, but I feel like it's a shame that getting as much of that chaotic stuff that all these guys would have gotten growing up, that these kids might be missing out on that. Now, saying that, they probably do go and play rugby or play basketball or whatever pretty well on the side of doing some CrossFit. I know Kobe Green, I think that's his first name. He's under 15 guy who's doing well in CrossFit. His dad's a rugby league sort of scout and coach, and he plays footy as well as doing CrossFit, and he's doing really well in both. I feel like that chaotic environment stuff is still really important, and all the skill side of things as well that is spoken about, but it's not there. It's a shame, and I think that's the challenge for for CrossFit boxers, and that's I guess the influence we're trying to have with Real Movement Project is to bring some more balance work, some acrobatics. You should be able to do back salts. Yes, the best guys can, but no one is learning them as part of the CrossFit system as it stands. And even just being able to kick a ball and being able to catch and throw, a lot of people that do a lot of CrossFit, those skills are actually going to be deteriorating while they're getting extremely fit and building strength and conditioning. But strength and conditioning is meant to go alongside a sport. And if there's no sport, then you're actually getting worse at, a lot of stuff while you're getting better at being a generalist, which is, kind of a paradox, but it's the best of the rest. It's, it's the thing that's out there at the moment that people can rip into and fill in that gap, as you were saying. I just hope that you're also getting a little bit of basketball or some other kind of more chaotic stuff at some stage as well to keep the brain and the system young.
Mate, I've got 3 kids. I've got 6 knees that come and attack my rib cage, and
that's enough chaos
very, very regularly. And carrying twins around. No, absolutely. With my, I've got a run crew on a Thursday morning up in Sydney, all CrossFit athletes, and we do a lot of agility work. We do loaded carries. We do some good fun relay stuff. It's not uncommon for us to have a ball around and throw that around before training and warm up and stuff. And it's just, I mean, running per se, I personally find it boring.
I'm glad you said it, because I didn't want to say it to the running lab guy.
No, look, I teach the mechanics of running. I love running, love it. Yeah. But I'm not just driven to sit there and run for 3 hours and
that shouldn't be the only thing that you do if you're trying to optimize life and have your body function really well.
I might offend some people, but I look at elite runners and I look at them as being unhealthy in looks. And you look and I know that every gram, every kilogram is more weight they've got to carry, and they've got to have speed. You question the strength that they're losing based on basically their body mass, but it's a tough battle. Again, that's the very top end. It's the very top end. I look at that, and as I say, you see a picture and think, oh gosh, just go and eat something. But again, It's about performance at that level. Whereas for me,
those competitive guys need to be super light. Yep. But someone who just wants to go and run a marathon, you've pretty much proven, and all these CrossFit guys are proving you don't need to be a stick man to go and run and be efficient and do okay. Yes, if you want to go and win, you probably need to look something like the Kenyans and the Ethiopians that are dominating the sport.
Yep.
But if you just want to get it done and have it be part of a healthy life, then losing muscle mass shouldn't be a part of your focus, seeing as though that muscle mass is going to be the key to longevity and anti-aging and, like functioning into later years, right?
Spot on. Again, always thinking about what's the end goal and aim. Even, doing PBs is fantastic, but do them as a strong, healthy human where you don't have to sacrifice anything. Your body's not always on the brink of collapse, perhaps. I was going to say, I lost my train of thought. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is a big go on tangents.
No, it's good. It's good you've bringing that rugby style conditioning. Like, I think because you've had that background, like bringing some of that into your running sessions is just gold. And I think that it's a shame that a lot of people don't get to experience that sort of stuff. Like, there's so much fun in some of those agility drills and
exactly.
Things that combine a bit of ball and a bit of footwork and evasion and all that stuff. Yeah.
I do bring that
ultimately
stuff
that's functional skill. Like that's real world. If you haven't got evasion, which you don't get evasion from doing snatches and clean and jerks, you build a base to be able to move explosively. But if you're never moving laterally, then you're probably going to deteriorate and be more likely to bust something if you do actually use some footwork or have to get away from something or those sorts of things. So
spot on.
I like the influence that you have in there.
Yeah, what I was going to mention before is that a lot of running programs for marathons are taken from a high-level program, taken from the principle of gradual overload. Absolutely, okay, it works great. But they're training like they're an elite athlete, yet their nutrition, their recovery, their sleep, everything else in their life is not an elite athlete. And so their recovery is shit house. And we both know what happens there is that they come and see me and they're so busted up that Achilles is literally about to snap. And, but I've got 18 Ks on Sunday and I have to do 18 Ks. Otherwise there's no way I can run my half marathon in 3 weeks time. I'm like, you could run it tomorrow, but not if your Achilles snaps. But they're so driven by the numbers on that program that that's everything. The problem with those programs is, even if it's talked about, it's very rarely implemented, is the recovery. And recovery between sessions is just, that's everything. Yeah.
So if you're trying to layer, you're trying to train like a professional, but you're layering that on top of a stressful life and a poor
sitting at a desk,
poor nutrition, poor posture, all those sorts of things. Yeah, cool. That makes a lot of sense. So changing gears a little bit, you've stepped into this thing of running a business. Were you doing podiatry as a business while you were still in rugby, or is this something that's been ramped up post rugby, like actually being an educator and running seminars and this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I was in podiatry during my rugby days. So trying to think now. So I went over to England, played rugby for a couple of years and didn't do a lot of podiatry after graduating then. When I came back and I was up in Queensland, I was playing rugby again. And it was just learning at that point. It was finding my ground in podiatry, doing all the general stuff that I don't do anymore, thankfully. And then as I was finishing up my rugby days was when I was really just loving everything movement, everything performance. And I was taking everything my coaches were teaching me over the years and thinking, how can I apply this to my work? And it wasn't even conscious thought. It just started to sort of come into my work a little bit. And I started to find faults and holes, massive holes in what I was doing in the whole orthotics and the whole shoes and all the rest of that. So it wasn't an overnight change. It was just constant exploring and progression. Then when I finished rugby, it just became a huge passion of mine. And it was really, I've got a lot to thank CrossFit for in respect to, it made me question a lot about what I was doing in my working life because of what I was discovering through CrossFit, doing some of their courses in gymnastics, in weightlifting, in mobility, any of those things I did like a long time ago. And I just started to mold. And then down here I call it my dungeon down here. I'm in the clinic at the moment. There's no windows to the outside world. So these things go to the actual building. I'm below ground level. And everyone would say, like, why don't other people do this? Why isn't it out there? And I'd always tell them that I can only be responsible for what happens within my room, within my four walls. Yeah. And that just got to the point where there was more to offer. So then I became more public on it. And then, then you get the backlash from people, and you got to learn how to deal with that and not sit there and stress on it, and see when someone writes you a big long essay at midnight and you wake up the next morning, you see, and you're like, they were up at midnight. I wonder how long they sat there thinking about what they were going to throw at me there. I was 3 hours asleep by then. And I get emails pretty much every day with people asking if they know a practitioner that does what I do in X part of Australia, or even the world. I get emails from the UK, from the US, from all over the place, just because they've heard me on a podcast, they've seen some of my stuff, and they're like, do you know someone that works like you? My answer is no. Because I can't be responsible for others. And that's where the workshops and seminars, the Running Lab workshops were already happening, but that's where the strong feet stuff and training practitioners and coaches came about. Was the only way I can answer those emails if I can sit there and say, if I can train some people, not to do what I do, but just in the philosophies and the principles that I have. Yeah. So I teach them my methods, but it's the principles and philosophies that if they really get that after any of my workshops or seminars, then they can start to use my methods, but they'll start to bring in their own methods, their own skill set, and that's how they'll truly be able to help people. Yeah.
Awesome. So you're getting that multiplier effect. Do you have a couple of students there, or people that you've worked with who you're really excited about the work that they're doing, and getting some joy out of that as a coach of coaches now?
Yeah, definitely. There's some who are doing amazing things. There's a couple down in Melbourne, a couple in Queensland. I'll be in Adelaide next month, and they're doing really good things. But even my staff here, a lot of them end up going on and they open their own clinics elsewhere. And they're not competition to me. They're people I can refer to, and I do refer to, even when they're still local-ish. I've got an intern at the moment who I'm training up, and she's awesome. She's been with me about 5 weeks now, and so every time I have someone work with me here, the system of actually training them better just keeps improving, just from learning from maybe what I didn't cover last time and little maybe holes that we had in the program.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. It's it's super exciting. And as I said, like, a couple of members of my community have been involved there on the athlete side and on the coaching side, and they've really enjoyed it. So for someone who does want to understand this stuff more deeply and see the systems and learn more about it, what's the best path to go down for that?
So coaches and practitioners, I've got 2 main workshops. I've got a Running Lab practitioner and coach workshop, which is this weekend in Melbourne. So it depends when this goes up. That'll be the 22nd, 23rd of October. They're 1-day workshops. It's the first time I've taught my entire Running Lab principles and methods to coaches and practitioners. And the reason being that running is such a complicated movement, yet needs to be simplified, that it's really hard for me to farm out my material and sit there and expect great results on the other side. So I just spent a lot of time trying to work out how I could actually teach it and make sure that the material coming out the other end was top quality. So I finally jumped into that, and then I've got my Strong Feet 2-day certification, and that's where I teach people everything about feet, how to take a foot from wherever it is when it comes into your gym, into your clinic, and sit there and transform it through the mobility, through the balance, coordination, proprioception, layer strength on top of that. And we delve deep into everything in that 2 days on shoes and orthotics and everything we possibly can. So effectively, one that's very much targeted towards running, and the other one that's targeted to the other 99% of people that don't have an interest in running, but they do have feet.
Yep.
So best way to find information on that is therunninglab.com. And just make sure you put the in front of it. Otherwise, you find a shoe shop in Singapore. So the runninglab.com, there's a workshops menu, and it's got a list of my workshops, because I also have athlete workshops as well. Yep. And generally speaking, they're at CrossFit boxes, and I'll do 15 members/athletes on that day. And that is basically going from A to B with running, and we do before and after video analysis and go through the principles of footwear and everything in those as well. Just the difference between the practitioner and coach one is the level of information on the why.
Yep.
And the how.
Yep. Yep, perfect. Makes sense. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people have got a lot out of this, and they'll have some questions they want to follow up with. So maybe we'll be able to grab you again sometime. Otherwise, they can definitely jump along to a workshop as you're getting around. I know that you've had a big impact a lot of people with this work. So great work. Great to thanks for sharing more of it today, and really enjoyed your approach and what you're doing. So thanks a lot, Tim.
Mate, I think we're on similar paths, and everybody who's on similar paths in trying to improve human performance from any level, we cross paths eventually. As I said to you when you got in touch, I'd known your work for a while. So the other place people can find information is on the Running Lab Facebook and the_running_lab on Instagram. And that's where I'll just post all sorts of random stuff and tidbits of information and bitch and moan about shoes and everything else that I do.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. Great work. And I really appreciate your time. And look forward to following the journey.
Definitely. Likewise. Thanks, Keegan.
Thanks, Tim. See you, mate.